The Misty decks are back for round 2. Like I briefly mentioned in the previous video, the Misty block of cards has a lot of really good, interesting Pokemon in them. The problem is they don't really have synergy with each other or with the Misty related trainers from those gym sets. So here's yet another Misty build of a Pokemon card that I really like, but couldn't really get it to work with anything else, so instead I kind of borrowed an idea from a Neo-On archetype that also uses the Poliwag line, although it's not Misty's Poliwag. With 90 HP, Misty's Poliwrath can tank quite a few hits, but its retreat cost does bog it down a little bit, and the fact that its attack is gonna cost a little more than it's probably worth, even though it is a really cool attack. Meanwhile, one evolution earlier, Misty's Poliwhirl has a pretty great attack in Rapids, where for only 2 energy, you're getting 20 damage off, and even have a chance to discard an energy off of your opponent's Pokemon. Even with Water Punch, you're dealing the same amount of damage as Aqua Ring would be on Misty's Poliwrath, with the potential to actually deal more damage because of the water energies attached to it. Go another evolution earlier to the basic Pokemon Misty's Poliwag, and you have an amazing status attack for only 1 energy, where you're either going to paralyze or put the Pokemon to sleep, which is amazing early game and can serve as a great comeback from something like an energy removal, because you only need to lay down that 1 water energy to use this attack. If only there was some way to have the bulk and might of Misty's Poliwrath, but use the better attacks of its prior evolutions. Clearly talking about the Neo Aerodactyl here, so this deck will be based around using Misty's Poliwrath, but not really utilizing Aqua Ring all that much, instead using the Rapids attack of Misty's Poliwhirl and using Misty's Poliwag in order to stall out your opponent in parts, and maybe even use special conditions to help disable your opponent's strategy. So we will be using Cleffa in this deck because we do have a little bit of setup we need to take care of. A full playset of Cleffa is going to help you get all of these evolution cards you need, so that ideally on turn 2 you have at least an Aerodactyl and a Poliwhirl. That way you can start getting off either a Hypnotic Stare or Rapids, depending on how much energy you have available. And Misty's Poliwag isn't that terrible of a Pokemon to start the game with instead of Cleffa, because you actually can get off that Hypnotic Stare and really stall out your opponent for a little bit. Getting off a successful stare against an opposing Cleffa can really stall out your opponent's strategy and really stall them on their setup, allowing you to kind of get a leg up on them and start using Rapids next turn to potentially discard energy and further stall them out and ruin their strategy. Now with Misty's Poliwhirl, that Water Punch is going to actually be really helpful when you're wanting to deal huge chunks of damage all at one time, something that Poliwrath can't do. It's going to max out at 30 solid damage without the help of something like a Plus Power or a Misty. But Water Ring can serve its own purpose, so if your opponent has a lot of maybe baby Pokemon on their bench like Elekid or Pichu or a retreated Cleffa, Water Ring is actually going to be the way to go, because in a few turns you can stack up enough damage to get multiple knockouts in one turn. The problem is it does cost a lot of energy, and keeping that amount of energy on a Pokemon in base Neo is pretty difficult to do. Unlike the Tentacruel deck I posted, this deck is going to use the other Misty Staryu that knows Swift. Swift is a great cleanup attack because it is going to help you get around a lot of really annoying things like perhaps a Mr. Mime or a Barrier Mewtwo, or most importantly, a Focus Band. Now, I will be running 2 copies of that Neo Aerodactyl in this deck. That way you can try to get onto your bench as fast as possible, then you can start utilizing those attacks underneath Misty's Poliwrath while still taking advantage of its 90 HP. No mysterious fossils in this deck. They are kind of unnecessary since you do have Fossil Egg, and Fossil Egg does require a coin flip, which is why I'm running a full playset of those. I can never hit the right coin flips. Terrible at coin flips. One of the reasons I guess I never excelled fully at the Pokemon trading card game. But also only 2 copies of Professor Elm, like other Misty decks. This does not like the water energy being in the discard. You want to have those in hand, and so discarding them unnecessarily just to get other cards, not really helpful for this deck. And so Professor Elm is the way to go. Only 2 copies because there are also 4 copies of Cleffa, so you do have a pretty strong chance of starting the game with some kind of hand reshuffle after you've already played down some basics and maybe even attached some tool cards. Gust of Wind and Double Gust, running the 2-2 setup for those. Because Misty's Poliwrath does have such an atrocious retreat cost, you want to be able to move it back and forth without too much trouble. And then also a full playset of energy removal because it does have such great synergy with Misty's Poliwhirl's Rapids attack, which is the attack you're most likely going to be using the most in this game because it only has a 2 energy cost. And anytime you miss those coin flips, you can just play in energy removal to go ahead and knock those energies off as you go anyway. Item Finder, of course, is going to let you recycle some of those essential trainers, like if you miss a Fossil Egg coin flip and you want to try it again, or if you just need more energy removals or Gust to try to get a Misty's Poliwrath out of danger. Computer Search is going to kind of do the same on the flip side, where if you're really needing a certain evolution card, or maybe even like a Goldberry in a very clutch moment, Computer Search is going to let you go ahead and pull those out of your deck at the cost of 2 cards, but by the time you're using a Computer Search, you've probably already gonna used a Cleffa to eke as many times as you want, so you're going to have at least 1 or 2 of those sitting around in your hand that you don't quite want to play to your bench yet, because if you do use Misty's Poliwrath Aqua Ring, it's going to knock out those Cleffas pretty quick, so go ahead and discard those, as after the first one you're not really going to need it anymore. The Gold Berries will help Poliwrath stay alive a lot longer because it's got 90 HP. Focus Band isn't really going to be all that helpful, so I just include a full playset of Goldberry in this deck. The only thing I would really use a Focus Band for would be Cleffa, but that's going to get retreated pretty quick as soon as you get a Poliwhirl set up to start using Rapids over and over again. So, didn't really see a need to have any in this deck. 2 copies of Nightly Garbage Run, mainly to get back any discarded Water Energy or even Aerodactyl, since those are pretty essential and there's only 2 copies of it. Gotta make sure you keep getting those back into your deck and then into your hand. And then 2 copies of Cerulean Gem, mainly for Misty Staryu, that way it can free retreat out of there, but also to help with the high retreat cost of Misty's Poliwrath and even Misty's Poliwhirl. And 1 copy of Pokemon Tower, just in case you're running into recycle energy if your game turns into a full Rapids game where it's just dealing that 20 damage and trying to discard energy. Pokemon Tower is going to be helpful in making sure they're not getting back any recycle energy, which can be really problematic for discard decks. And a full playset of double colorless energy, since Misty's Poliwrath and Poliwhirl can take advantage of those for their attacks. They're big attacks, actually. And one of the problems you may be thinking with Aqua Ring is, yeah, you're doing this great spread damage because most likely you're going to be dealing 10 to everything on your opponent's side because not a lot of water decks in this format, but you also have Aerodactyls on your side that are going to be hit. But really, that's not a problem, because if you're able to keep enough energy on Poliwrath to continuously use Aqua Ring enough to knock out a 60 HP Aerodactyl, then you don't really need that Aerodactyl anymore. You're fine just using Aqua Ring over and over again, and that's probably going to be your game winner if you get to that point. So in a way, this deck is pretty similar to the Kingdra Center deck, except that it does require more energy, so you can't really spam Pokemon Center like you can with Kingdra. It's also really reminiscent of the Politoed Frog Song archetype that I mentioned earlier that you can find in the Neo-On format. If you want to go full aggro with this deck, you can 100% run it without Misty's Poliwrath and just use the attacks off of Poliwhirl. That way you can cut out the Fossil Eggs and the Misty's Poliwrath and the Aerodactyl to fit in some more aggressive Misty cards. In particular, Misty's Golduck pairs very handsomely with Misty's Poliwhirl because it can deal 40 damage for only 2 energy, but also for 2 energy you can use Super Removal, which has some great synergy with Poliwhirl's Rapids attack, and also with my favorite aggro card of all time, Black Star Promo Mewtwo. So using these 3 in a deck can make for a very aggro Misty's deck, especially with the Misty Trainer card. This sort of addition with Misty's Golduck was actually pitched to me by Jamie M down in the comments of the last video, so credit where credit is due. But with this build of Misty's Poliwrath, I wanted to showcase all of the options that become available to you by utilizing that Neo Aerodactyl, where you can deal heavy direct damage, you can deal spread damage, you can discard energy, you can even dole out guaranteed special conditions. And with that Aerodactyl, you have options for 1 energy, 2 energy, 3 energy, and 4 energy attacks. That way you always have options available to you no matter how much your opponent uses energy removal. Even with all of these options, Poliwrath still can't really stack up to other big decks in this metagame, however this still is a really fun deck to use, much like the Tentacruel deck. I still have one more Misty deck to upload this week, so look forward to that. If you want to find me on Instagram, you can do so at DrunkShuckle. Let me know down in the comments what you thought about this deck. How would you run this deck? What are your favorite Misty cards? Or have you had any success running Misty decks in your playtesting? Also, let me know any deck requests you may have or topics you want me to discuss on this channel in the future. Until next time, bye-bye.